As sports history fans, we often reminisce about the legends. Willis Reed limping onto the NBA Finals court, Kurt Schilling's bloody sock, Kerry Strug's courageous dismount, and so many more. These moments often define sports history. But what about the countless injuries that did not become legends, or careers that were derailed due to inadequate care? That's where this episode's sponsor comes in. Introducing to you, ILP Sports Consultants, your trusted sports injury partner, available 24/7. Brian Maelli at ILP Sports Consultants has over 20 years of experience in the orthopedic and sports medicine industry, and he has worked with athletes across the gamut, from youth to amateurs, professionals, in almost every sport played in the United States of America, accommodating athletes at every stage of their career. This adaptability ensures that ILP services are perfectly tailored to your skill level, no matter where you are in your athletic journey. With ILP, you are in control. Choose the steps that matter most to you. Diagnosis, treatment plan, recovery, or the whole journey. ILP services are tailored to your unique needs. Rushing for care is a common pitfall, leading to future problems. ILP Sports Consultants helps you make the right decisions, ensuring that you receive timely and safe care. And here's a bonus. Brian hosts the Injured List podcast, sharing insights and athlete stories you won't want to miss. Whether you're a concerned parent or grandparent, or an athlete yourself seeking guidance, ILP Sports Consultants is your beacon of hope in sports injury management. Visit ilpsports.com today. That's the letters ilpsports.com. ILP Sports Consultants, where your well-being is the priority and your recovery is the mission. Choose ILP Sports Consultants for a healthier sports journey, helping you get back in the game the smart way.
Blog Talk Radio.
Tonight we'll go back in time to seasons past, when 22 men graced the rugged fields of yesterday, fighting for one more first down, one more yard gain, one final score, which would bring victory after 60 minutes of battle on the gridiron. Tonight we'll explore the world of Gridiron Greats. Welcome to Gridiron Greats Football History and its Memorabilia on the Gridiron Greats Publishing and Broadcasting Network, in conjunction with Swick Enterprises. And we're live from the Wallingford, Connecticut home of Gridiron Greats magazine. I'm Bob Swick, publisher and editor of Gridiron Greats magazine, and I'll be your host for the show. Gridiron Greats is the only publication in America which focuses upon the history and memorabilia of the North American football game since its inception in 1869. We cover 150 plus years of football history and memorabilia. You can find us on the web at GridironGreatsMagazine.com. It's at this time I would like to introduce my co-host. He's a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats magazine, a football memorabilia historian specializing in pre-World War II items, in particular Red Grange, and also Seattle Seahawk items, in particular Steve Largent. He hails from Portland, Oregon, Mr. Joe Squires. Joe, welcome to the show this evening.
Pleasure to be on, Captain, as always.
Good to hear you again, Joe. And let's get right into the thick of things. There was some incredible uncut sheets that came up in an auction. Can you fill our audience in a little bit about those?
Yes. As hopefully everybody knows, I am an avid collector of uncut sheets, especially vintage sheets. And I've mentioned this a few times, my quest for the 1935 Chickle sheet. But in lieu of that, any vintage sheet will do. And Bob and I were talking, and auction recently had some partial uncut sheets from the 1950 Bowman set. And in my decade of collecting uncut sheets, I've managed to pick up 75% of the set, and this was a perfect auction item because it had all of the players represented, all 144 in the set. But let me start over here. The 1950 Bowman set is comprised of 144 cards, and it was printed on 4 sheets, each sheet containing 36 cards. And for lack of a better way to label them, I've labeled them sheet A, B, C, and D. Sheet A obviously has card number 1, the Doak Walker rookie card. The 48 leaf is considered his rookie card, but he's wearing a college jersey in that, so a lot of people consider the 1950 Bowman to be his rookie card. So card number 1, Doak Walker, all the way to card number 36. So sheet A. I've had sheet A, C, and D in my possession, framed in my office for the last couple years. I've only been missing sheet B. But sheet B is a pretty rare sheet because it has Elroy Hirsch, Tom Fears, Marion Motley, Otto Graham. I mean, it's got quite a few Hall of Fame rookie cards on it, so very tough to come by. And this auction had the sheets cut up into 12-card panels. So obviously they took 36-card uncut sheets and cut them into thirds. And I'll take it. I'll take, putting three 12-card uncut sheets and butting them up against each other, framing them, and having a complete 144-card set of uncut sheets for a 70-year-old set.
Wow.
And I think all of us collectors are kind of completionists at heart. So to be able to have a 70-year-old set in uncut sheets up, I'm pretty happy about that.
That's amazing. Now I got to ask a question, and you can educate our audience a little bit about it. Obviously, different sheets have different player cards on it. I'll use something in my time frame, 65 Topps football. Obviously, the sheet that has Joe Namath on it was going to be in much more demand than the other sheet. Now,
correct.
Would that be a drive or force in your experiences why that 1950 sheet B with all the Hall of Famers was in such short supply? A collector would say, hey, I just want that sheet because I'm collecting, Hall of Famers on it. I'm not worried about the complete set. What has been your experiences with that as far as finding stuff, since obviously this was a key find for you for your collection?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's so thinly collected that I would lean towards yes. But each of the sheets have such star power. Sheet A, like I said, Doak Walker, Sid Luckman, Tony Candeo on it. Sheet D, has Chuck Bednarik, and then, the card number 144, the last card in the set, is a very, very rare card. So I think, but without a doubt, you're right. Sheet B, the middle section of sheet B. Well, actually, it'd be the third section of sheet B is definitely the rarest. I mean, because I'm looking at, the one that I was really after, and it's card 43 through 45 on the top row. 43 is Marion Motley, 45 is Otto Graham. Right below it is Tom Fears, and it's definitely got star power, and it's the one I was after. If they would have sold these in unique, individual, then it's the one I would have gone after. I had to buy the whole set just to get sheet B. But that's a good question. But I think it's so rarely traded, or so rarely do you see something like this come up, that I don't know if you can put a thumb on the pulse of that, but I would lean towards yes.
Well, I always wondered about that because, you know, over the years, my experience of looking at sheets at shows, and I'm going back to the 80s, you know, I would see from time to time was something that was very prevalent here in New England. There was a bunch of 1960 Fleer football 4-card, 8-card, and 10-card sheets. And I always wondered, you know, somebody obviously cut up a sheet and or was it printer's scrap or cutting scrap, so on and so forth. Because in New Haven, there was a place called New Haven Federal Paper Board, which used to print for a short period of time Topps cards. And they would cut it. And they were somewhat prevalent in Connecticut, especially the 64, 65, 66 sets. Uncut sheets, you know, came around, so on and so forth. And I saw them later on, you know, years later at a show, and they would be prevalent there, so on and so forth. But I was always fascinated with the Fleer strips, and I had a bunch of them over the years that I bought and sold. And something like this, obviously, much more rare, much more difficult to find, much better player selection, so on and so forth. So I was just curious if, you know, if it was collected like that. I would assume somebody who's a Graham collector will only want the sheet that Graham's on. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that seems logical. And like you say, too, and it's very true, they are very, very thinly traded and bought and sold in the market. I mean, there's not a overly great demand except for, unfortunately, most of the stuff that you're still trying to finish your run with, especially the Chickle. So
take for example the 1984 top set. There are, you know, 432 card sheets. Sheet C, you know, sheet C has the star power. It's got the Elway and Marino card running midway on the left border. So you can buy sheet A, B, and D for about you can pick all three of those sheets up for about $100. Sheet C with Marino and Elway will cost you about $350. So, you know, just going off of that, where people are discerning between the sheets with the star power, you definitely got it. But like you mentioned, there's just each card, each sheet in this 50 Bowman has such star power. I mean, I'm looking at a printout of them now. It's just I recognize almost every single card. I mean, there's you know, sheet A, like I mentioned, has Doak Walker, you know, Steve Van Buren, Sid Luckman, Tony Candeo, Joe Perry, you know, another Hall of Fame rookie card. I mean, that's just sheet A.
Yeah.
You know, it's.
I mean,
it's
any old set like that is going to have star power no matter what sheet you're looking at, so on and so forth. And it's got to be in demand one way or the other, especially to the more advanced collector, especially the more advanced collector, someone like yourself, who actually, you know, collects the full sheets and, you know, is comfortable enough knowing or not comfortable and has enough knowledge to understand what you're actually purchasing there. Whereas somebody else would probably say, you know, what am I going to do with this? I'll cut it up type of thing. And ruin a piece of football history, to say the least. So,
think about how hard it is to take something that's 70 years old and to keep it intact for all these years. These sheets are in great shape, too. Because several years ago, BST had a partial 65 Topps Tallboy uncut sheet with the Namath rookie on it. It was pretty beat up. There was staining, there were tears, and even the Namath rookie had a couple of, you know, scuffs on it. But at some point, something is so rare, you're almost insensitive to condition. It's like, it's beat up, it's in tough shape, but you know what? There's Joe Namath in an uncut sheet. You know, I got to have that. So to grab a 70-year-old sheet and it's in good shape, it's the unicorn of the hobby for sure. I love it.
Now, refresh my memory. What's left on your want list for the sheets that you're looking for, uncut sheets that you're looking for?
Well, definitely, you know, nobody knows. I've tried to figure out, you know, how the 35 Chickle was cut. Because you can take a look at the Skybird, you know, uncut sheet, and you can kind of assume that, you know, the 35 Chickle football was 2 18-card sheets. You know, but that's not even well known. And when I first started digging into how a 48 leaf sheet was laid out, I really started buying miscut cards. You know, you'd flip it over and you'd be able to see what the next card was, or if it was really miscut.
Right.
And then suddenly you had, Mike Thomas and another guest we had, Scott Alpaugh, who really, once the floodgates opened, once I said, hey, here, I've got a couple of ideas on how a 48 leaf sheet laid out, they had enough other information that we were able to figure it out. And then by luck, a partial uncut sheet of Series A, 48, because the 48 leaf set is 96 cards. It was printed in a 48 card sheet, became available. So I started trying to figure out how the 35 chickle sheet was laid out, hoping that the same luck would strike. That once I started investigating it, one would come up, but it's not. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
35 chickle would definitely be it. I have one partial uncut 48 Bowman sheet. I wouldn't mind a couple more of those. Got a 50. I think the next big white whale for me would be 52 Bowman large, because it's such a cool set. I think that'd be pretty cool, but they're pretty awesome. I mean, even my coworkers love walking in my office because I've got probably a dozen of them framed behind my desk, and they all mention they just love seeing them. I've been doing a lot of Zoom calls lately, and people be like, "What the hell is that behind you?" I'm like, "Oh, it's an uncut football sheet." So it's pretty cool.
And I hope when they're asking about it, you're suggesting that they buy a subscription to Gridiron Greats magazine, so they become more knowledgeable about football.
As any great football hobbyist should, they should subscribe to Gridiron Greats. Shameless plug. I love it.
I've always enjoyed them. I've enjoyed looking at them. I think they frame, so they're so cool to look at framed. And your collection is truly above and beyond anything that I know of.
Your baby, your 65 Philly in this same auction, there was a really beat up 65 Philly uncut sheet that went for, what did that go for, Bob? I told you. It went for like $7,000.
Yeah.
And this was a beat up uncut sheet, and I was stunned because I've got a B sheet from 65 Philly. So whoever went after this, paid about triple what it should have been worth. So somebody really wanted that collectible, which is really cool to see.
Could have been somebody like me who opened 65 Phillies as a kid and wanted to see it, completely uncut type of thing. And or there's another sheet collector out there. Who knows? You never know. All right. At this time, I know our special guest has stepped in, and I'd like to introduce him. And he's well known to our audience and to the magazine. He is a senior contributing writer to Gridiron Greats magazine, a football memorabilia historian, specializing in the early artifacts of the game. He also has an incredible run of football card sets from the 1894 Mayos through the 1980s. He hails from Virginia. I'd like to welcome Mr. Jeff Payne. Jeff, thanks for being on the show tonight.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
We're good.
Awesome.
Very good.
Awesome. Nice to see another senior contributing writer of Gridiron on the show.
I know they're so few and far between, aren't they? So we got to stick together. You mentioned your uncut sheet, Joe. So I have a signed, an autographed photo of Otto Graham in my background in my office, and I get asked the same thing all the time. But I get asked like, is that a soccer player or who is that? Is that you'd be amazed what people. And I'm like, no. And I always say, that's Otto Graham. And I always get these blank looks, right? Nobody knows who Otto Graham was. So
we've had a couple Zoom calls, Jeff. I thought you used a generic Zoom background. I would have liked to have seen the autogram.
Okay. Well, we can change that. I was probably in my other office, so that one's less exciting.
Cool. Well, Jeff's been on our show several times, and tonight our show is going to focus on something different, an area that both Jeff and Joe are collecting and have a lot of knowledge about. And I'm going to lead off and basically start off by asking Jeff, how'd you get interested in the history and memorabilia of what our subject will be tonight, and that's the Pottsville Maroons?
The Pottsville Maroons. I love this subject. I can talk about it forever. It actually started when I read the book, The Breaker Boys, right, which is somebody recommended it to me maybe a decade ago. I like to read. I like to read football. I'm always looking for a good book, and it's the book about the 1925 Pottsville Maroons and their stolen championship, and it's really well written. And I grew up in Pennsylvania. The Pottsville's in Pennsylvania. I was fascinated that there was an NFL team before the Eagles and the Steelers in PA, because I grew up there and had never heard of them. Of course, it turns out there were a couple. But, that I think was the thing that hooked me. It was kind of, it was from my home state, and it just fascinated me that there was a team, before the Steelers and the Eagles that was playing in the NFL. And then, of course, the book and the whole story is so intriguing that I got interested in the Maroons.
Nice. I love that book. I think Andy Becker mailed me a copy of it like 8-9 years ago, just to kickstart me. My heroin dealer giving me a sample, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Football heroin, right?
It's a great.
It's funny because I have a couple of.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I always shut up when you speak. I have a couple of Pottsville Maroons shirts that I like to wear every once in a while, and I was just at a Memorial Day, thing, and somebody was like, "Pottsville Maroons, 1926. What's that?" I'm like, "Well, let me tell you." So,
you got a couple hours?
Yeah. But yeah, the 26 set, a complete set, 18 cards, which you reminded me of before the show, came up in the hunt, in the hunt auction. So tell us about how you first noticed that those came up, the euphoria that was coursing through your veins when you saw it, verified it, and then what went into acquiring it.
Yeah, so as Bob mentioned, I like to collect sets. I've always been a set collector. He referenced my mainstream run. I gotta finish the set, and I first heard about these about the same time I read The Breaker Boys when a lot came up way long ago, and I didn't know what they were, and I missed them, and then I found out how rare they were, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's a set of Pottsville Maroons player cards, really? Wow, that's incredible. And so I started collecting them, and through hook or by crook, I was able to get up to having 15 of the 18. But I really didn't know if I would ever complete it, right? Because this is one of those sets where you could wait a decade for some of these cards to show up, if at all. In fact, one of them, the Charlie Berry, who was their star end, he's in the College Hall of Fame. He played pro baseball too. He was an umpire in both the NFL and Major League Baseball for decades. His card, nobody I knew had ever even seen it. None of the lots that had come up, the few that had come up, included the Charlie Berry card, and some people didn't even think it existed. So I needed that one that nobody knew, at least nobody I knew that it existed. And then I needed the Tony Latone, which is, he was the leading rusher in the 20s for the NFL. Some of us believe he should be in the Hall of Fame, but that's another subject. I always wanted that card. The Breaker Boys book is a lot about Tony Latone, which, I was like, wow, Tony Latone has a card? That's cool. And then Barney Wentz, who was his running mate, Penn Stater, go Penn State, local boy, gone good, and led the league in touchdowns and was all pro. And the three of those are, for whatever reason, really hard to find. And so, when I saw the lot come up, and it was the Super Bowl auction for Hunt, and there was a framed set of these cards, complete set of these cards that was also autographed. They were all autographed. and also had a program, 1926 program. I think it was against the Buffalo Rangers, Maroons versus Buffalo. Program in the middle of it. It was just a spectacular piece, and my heart did skip. I almost probably had like a heart attack, quite honestly, because I could not believe
Checked it twice.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, I was like, wait, what? This has got to be like a reprint, right? Because on eBay, stuff comes up all the time that makes you look double, look twice, and then you see the RP after it, or the story about their grandfather and some old chest, and you just know it's not true. And I was like, well, this is it. Now I knew where a couple of the Latones lived. I knew where at least one of the Wentzes lived. So I knew collectors who had those two. And I figured eventually I would get them, right? Just based on where I'm at and my kind of collecting life and where they're at. And I was like, okay, well, within a decade I'll get within needing the Barry. Yep. But I've never seen a Barry. And then when this came up, I was like, well, this is it, right? I got to figure out how to get these 3 cards, right? And so then it became about, all right, I only need 3. Who else wants some of these that is willing to play, right? And that's where the real kind of saga started, right?
Assembling the dream team of collectors who are willing to chop up an 18-card 1926 Pottsville Maroon display.
Well, yeah, that was the other thing is these were all framed. We didn't have a lot of information about how they were attached, right?
Yep.
And part of me is like, gosh, you really want to tear apart something. But, to be fair, it was something that had been manufactured later. It wasn't the way they were produced. And so, I felt like it wasn't damaging, an artifact that was, how it had been created. It was really just more a worry of, well, how are they attached and how could they come off? And so, I went out looking. I knew, I tracked this market, so I knew pretty much who the, let's say 10 people are that would be after these items. And I also knew pretty much who had what. We were talking before the show. We kind of have a list of where all the cards have come from and where they all ended up and all, more or less. We don't have them all, but a lot. And so I just started, calling a few people that I thought would be interested. I called you, Joe, of course, and you were crazy enough to say you wanted to be involved.
I was humbly excited to be on that short list of people
absolutely.
you would call.
Well, you and I still have done the greatest trade in the history of professional card football, right? I mean, Joe and I did a trade years ago that involved Star Player Candy and Pottsville Maroons postcards, and just to say those 2 sets in the same sentence is like, it's like seeing an extinct species, right? And I still
it was pretty cool.
That was one of the most fun things I've ever done.
I sent some Star Player Candy cards Jeff's way, and he sent a couple Pottsville Maroon cards my way. And it makes me laugh.
It's like 2 kids on the playground, right? We got like cards that we washed, our moms washed in our jeans, and we're out there like swapping, 72 tops. But no, we're doing 26, Pottsville postcards and 28 Star Player Candy cards, right? It's just crazy. But you joined in, and then and Steve Wolf, who I know has been on the show and is a friend of ours. Obviously, he actually lives pretty close to Pottsville, and his wife's from that area as well. And he's gotten really into the Pottsville Maroons in the last couple of years, and was itching to work on this set and make progress. So we pulled him in too. And then it was just about, okay, what do we think this might go for, and how do we price this? How do we split it up? How
high are we willing to go? How high are we willing to go?
What's the limit here? Yeah, what's the limit? Yep. Is everybody comfortable with that limit? Because we knew it wasn't going to go cheap, right? I'm kind of happy that, since I've seen so many of these cards, and you've seen a bunch, Joe, and Steve has a pretty good sense for the hobby and had seen some as well. Yeah, I think we were all pretty much, my biggest worry then was, we're all going to kind of come up with what we think, and we're just going to be way off, way different, and we're not going to be able to agree on, you know, what's the right number to, you know, to go.
And we
did. We did.
We did. So tell us a little bit about the agony of defeat and the thrill of victory, you know, and the bidding in the last couple minutes where, you know, we thought we'd lost it, and then. Yeah,
then we won. Yeah, so what happened was, so we weren't, obviously, the Super Bowl auction is a live auction. I think it was in Miami, right? Is that where it was? I can't recall.
Yeah.
But you know, so it was a live auction, but it was also online. You could bid online up until the night before. You know, put in max bids and do online bidding, and then they closed the online portion and went to a live version that was both, you know, in person and also through, I think it was Invaluable, which is a kind of a real-time bidding, you know, app that keeps up with a live bid process, right? And so it went live, Super Bowl, you know, I guess day before the Super Bowl, I think it was. And, of course, we had our strategy. You know, we wanted to, since we weren't there live, we were going to put a max bid in. You were only allowed to do max bids up until the night before. And so our strategy was to put in a max bid, you know, right at the last minute so nobody could, you know, string bid us or, you know, mess with it after that, right, until it got live. And then we hoped that bid would stand. Now, you know, Steve was closest to Hunt, and we figured, of course, we were going to want to pick this thing up. We weren't going to want it shipped around the planet. And we figured Steve, since he was close, could get it easier. We looked at taxes and all that, and it seemed like the most cost-effective thing was for Steve to go get it. And so we had him bid so that he would win, right? So he put the bid in, and the max bid. Now, I had bid earlier, just because I always do, right? If it's something I want, I usually put a bid in just in case I decide to go for it. So I had put one in early on, the placeholder, but, you know, didn't think anything of it. And then we get, you know, we get to the live portion, and I guess you could say there were some bid I won't call them inconsistencies, but a little funky at the
irregularities.
End.
Irregularities, for sure.
Yeah, what happened was, you know, I knew what our max bid was, and I wasn't planning to bid. I was just kind of sitting there. But as I'm sitting there watching and it's coming up, you know, in my head I'm thinking, am I going to let this thing go for one extra bid increment, right? We've all been there, right? You get, you know,
without a doubt.
You get remorse when you, like, hold your ground and you say, this is as high as I'm going to go, gosh dang it, and then you lose and you go, you know, what was the extra great?
I would have gone one more.
Yeah,
I would have gone
I'm going to now spend, you know, 2 decades looking for these, and for an extra $2,000 I could have had them? Like, what am I, like, crazy? Yeah, so as we got closer and closer, I had in my head, you know what? If we get to the top, this thing, we get outbid, gosh dang it, I'm going to do another bid. And I'll just, like, call Joe and Steve and say, look, if you want me to eat the extra, I'm eating the extra, but I let the ones I need get away for whatever, right? And so I was pretty certain, you know, that I'd take it one more if we had to, hoping we didn't have to. Of course, we get to the end, and then things got a little hinky in that there was, you know, it started getting up close to our max, and we were right on in terms of what it was worth, which was great. But then a bid came up, and it got retracted. And then a bid in the middle came up. And it was really unclear whose bid that was, right? Because it was under our max bid, but the retracted one was over our max bid. And so I was really confused. I couldn't tell if we were winning or not. In hindsight, I probably should have been on the phone with Steve, because Steve would have, you know, he would have known. But in hindsight, it didn't matter, because it said to him he'd been outbid. And then that bid was somehow retracted, and it was very confusing. But, you know, the countdown came, and they were like, you know, going once, going twice. And I said, gosh dang it, I'm not letting this go away. So I hit it one more time. And then they went, going once, going twice, you won. And I was like, oh, yes, we won. Of course, Steve thinks we lost. I think he texted you and called you and said we lost. He texted me and called me. I'm dancing around the room, you know. I'm like, yes, we won. I can't believe we won this. This is so awesome. So then I got on the phone to let you guys know what happened. And, you know, obviously sorrow turned to extreme joy. I think we were all pretty excited that we pulled it off. And the good news is, Hunt was actually really cool. We contacted Hunt and said, look, there was something funky that happened here at the end. Can you kind of look at it and make sure something weird didn't happen? Because we got this, retraction, and it really was bizarre. And, they were awesome to work with, and, made it, to me, they made it right. They made sure it was fair, and that,
so what happened? What
mm-hmm.
happened? There was an actual glitch in their software or something for the bidding, or
nobody.
There's an incremental. Oh,
yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say, like you have to bid in increments. Like, let's say it's 100, the next bid's 200, the next bid's 300, the next bid's 400, for
mm-hmm.
example.
Yeah,
our bid, the next bid should have been our bid times 1.1. But a weird bid went in, like our bid times 1.05, and it shouldn't have been allowed because the next increment was 1.1. But it was allowed. So the 1.05 bid comes in. Jeff thinks that's a bid. He puts in another bid to try and get it. But when in all actuality, the 1.05 bid should not have been allowed. And
mm-hmm.
Hunt was cool
mm-hmm.
because they're like, yeah, you're right. We shouldn't have allowed it. It's like in poker. You can't. You can't go into a pot
mm-hmm.
at half the blind.
Wow. It was weird. And from talking to them, they were going to go dig in. They did dig into it, and they came back and said, the reality is though, whatever the auctioneer is saying, right, is the real legit number, and they didn't actually have a record of the retraction. That bid or that retraction was a mistake. It was, somebody entered something into the system incorrectly, or something happened, and they weren't quite sure exactly what. At that point, as long as they made it right, we didn't really care. So we were like, okay, whatever, let's just make this right, and we want our piece. Like, can we pick it up?
Yeah.
So,
wow.
It all worked. The good guys won in the end, which was, the way it should be in all good, good Hollywood movies.
The good collectors, the appreciative ones.
We talked about this. This is a little off script, but we talked about this in other shows and privately. Why are those free cards so rare? Why did you have such a tough time finding them? What can you tell our audience about them?
Well, first of all, I would say they are the three biggest stars in the set. You could argue, there were a few other players that were obviously really good. So they are the superstars, in my opinion, just in terms of the accolades that they got in the league. There's a few other like Ernst and Osborne that are, pretty well known and won some all-pro stuff as well. But they're stars. I believe they were all printed as sets only, right? We've tracked down, and we believe right now that all the cards we know of are all from 4 different places. They came from 4 different places. We sort of know where they came from. And my sense is they were all complete sets. But through the years, people that had them cherry-picked the stars and kept them and sold the rest. And so, over time, the one that was in Leland's, somebody wanted those 3 cards that weren't in that set and cherry-picked them out, so they're still maybe out there somewhere. The one in the Super Bowl auction was from Duke Cott, who is kind of the grandfather of football card collecting. And what we learned later, which was interesting, was that piece had actually supposed to come up for auction about 15 years ago. It was at the National. Somebody was flashing it around that it was going to go to auction and it would come out of his estate, and it never made it to auction. Somebody made them a big offer for it. I heard a rumor that they were asking $50,000 for it, which is just an incredible amount of money. We did not pay that. And that it disappeared again for 15 years. Somebody snagged it, bought it for something, and it never, it didn't show up again for 15 years. And so I think it's just that they're the stars and they get cherry picked out, and the rest of them are more common or they're not as well known, and so they get sold. And so they're probably either still out there somewhere, or of course, there's a chance they got cherry picked and then they got consumed. They got thrown away. They got paper drive. They got, somebody threw away when somebody died. Who knows? Who knows where they are?
Yep.
Yep.
No, as we've mentioned before, it talks paper drives, fires, floods.
Mm-hmm.
Children.
Well, they don't have names on them either, right? They have no name on them. There's no name either. There's no information on them. They're just, RPPC photo postcards of a player. The back is just it's just a postcard back. Other than the ones that came from Joe Zacco, who was owner of a sports card store or a sportsman store in Pottsville and one of their biggest fans, and worked to get their stolen championship brought back, who stamped some of his with his stamp from his store. There's really nothing that would tell you what they were. So if you were somebody going through your relatives stuff and you saw this thing, you just think it was a picture of somebody they knew, and you just chuck it, right? I mean, I don't know who this person is. There's no name on it. There's nothing on it. So I suspect that a lot of them got chucked. And that was because you couldn't tell what they were.
I always find it interesting. I haven't been to a paper show in a while, meaning paper memorabilia, and inevitably there's a bunch of postcard dealers set up there, and I always obviously look for anything football, and I rarely come upon early photos of players, whether it's portrait or action or whatever. Mostly you see the stadium postcards and stuff like that. But on the sheer occasion, if I find something, I'll always buy it, no matter what the price of it is, and I'll try to match it in the bunch of, several books I have right now, obviously looking online, which is much easier, to try to find out who it may be or stumble upon somebody who might have some notoriety or whatever. So that's another set that can be actually seen. And, if you study it enough, which you guys have studied over the years, you could find it, and then it comes out, and so on and so forth. So it's interesting to see stuff like this come to the market and the prices that it generates. So
that's my dream, Bob.
Incredible.
I want to be like sifting through some set of postcards, and right there in a row are 18 Pottsville Maroons just sitting there with $1 on each of them. That's my dream, man, because somewhere they're out there, and there's only 10, 20 people in the world who would see it and know what it was immediately, right? I just got to find the right show.
That's me at a tag sale here locally with the Mayos, and the guy says, "Give me $1 for that card." The guy doesn't have any name on the card. All the other ones have names on them. Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure. Let me grab my wallet as fast as I humanly can here.
Exactly.
No problem.
Yeah.
No
well, you guys
problem.
know the story. Todd Tobias, our buddy, collects the Lee Jeans. Postcards. Todd Tobias collects those Lee Jeans postcards.
Never heard of him.
You never
heard of him?
Yeah. He's very low profile. You never hear much about him. But he got me, to know what those were. And last year at the National, I was just flipping through some stuff, and right there was the Jim Taylor Lee Jeans, and I was like, what do you want for this? And the guy's like, I don't know, it's a postcard of Jim Taylor. It's kind of cool. $25. I could not get that 20 and 5 out of my wallet fast enough. I think the one somebody just sold one at auction. It went for like $1,000. Now it was in nicer condition than mine, but I could not get that money out of my pocket quick enough for the dude, you live with those kind of things,
I love listening to you two talk about, your fantasies are sifting through boxes at a card show.
Unbelievable. Jeff,
it.
I gotta ask you, are you collecting anything besides these postcards from the Maroons, for example, any programs or possible ticket stubs, photos? Are you doing anything else with the team?
Yeah, I have a lot of Maroon stuff. Yeah, Steve Wolf about it. He always says I should set up a museum for the Maroons,
You're getting there.
Most of it, yeah. Well, I do look for Maroon stuff because I like it, and it's really cool, as mentioned, my home state and all. But also, I was fortunate enough. There were two huge bins. I mean, we're talking like 3 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet kind of bins of all of his correspondence. His being Joe Zacco, the sports store owner. That correspondence with players, correspondence with the NFL, old photos. It had been cherry picked through because I know his estate sold, and then the guy who bought it sold it. Then another, I guess, probably 20 years later, and so it had been kind of cherry picked through. This was what was considered the leftovers, right? But it came up for auction. I was like, gosh, that's a lot of stuff, and I was like, I bet there's gems in there, and so I just bought it and sifted through it. It took me over a year, slowly to work through it all and figure out, because none of it was marked, and I had to figure out what it all was. I still have a big pile. I don't know what they are, but I did learn pretty much everything in there was from Joe Zacco, and everything had something to do with the Maroons. Sometimes it was a mystery. It took me a while to figure out what it was or how it related, but everything I found in there had some connection to the Maroons. So it's kind of like a detective, novel, right? Trying to unravel this stuff. And I found some gems in there, but I have a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of letters from players, and autographs and photos, and other, reunion programs, and just some 3 or 4 carousels of slides that he took in the 60s at both the reunion and the first 2 Hall of Fame induction ceremonies. So I have Red Grange, a candid of Red Grange getting his bust, of Bronco Nagurski getting his bust, of everybody that was inducted those first 2 years. The Maroons went to those ceremonies because they were trying to, convince the NFL to give them their championship back. And I have these fantastic slides of all these players getting inducted, for the first 2 classes of the Hall of Fame, which I think is priceless. I mean, it's not worth probably much to anybody but me, but I just think they're fantastic. So I have a lot of Maroon stuff at this point. Yeah, and I really love it.
You've done a couple of sports card chat rooms. You've done a couple, brain dumps of, the stuff that you're sifting through, as well as the Maroons postcards and stuff. You kind of joked about a museum, but have you ever thought about writing a book or something like that just brings all of this data into one spot?
Yeah, I got to get retired first, Joe. That would take some work. I would love to do something like that, but I need more time to be able to do something like that. Yeah. Definitely, I'll just have to settle for an occasional article to Gridiron Greats, on something in the meantime. But I would love to, spend my retirement years traveling to card shows and paper shows and writing stuff up and just enjoying the history of football, the hobby, whatever. It's what I like to do. So I would love to do that someday.
Well, you've touched on a Joe Zacco bin of stuff, postcards, programs, and then do you have a couple of items in your Maroons collection that kind of rise to the top that are your favorites?
Yeah, I do. So in 1928, they gave each of the players a coal shape of football made out of coal-shaped football, a fob, right, that you would attach to a watch ring or to, something, right? They were big in the 20s and 30s, and they all have possible Maroons etched on them. They have the player's name and the year etched on them, and I've been able to get 2 of them. There's like 20 people on the team, so there's 20 of them floating around out there. I've seen 2 others that I don't have, so I know 4 exist. But I got 2 of the biggies. I have Tony Latone, who, as you can probably tell, is one of my favorite players, and then I have Pete Henry, who's in the Hall of Fame. Stats Henry are the 2 that I have, and I just love those things. I mean, to hold something that Pete Henry held in his hand, right, or Tony Latone held in his hand. Mm-hmm. To me, is just the ultimate in history, right? If you're into that kind of stuff. So those are definitely up there with the RPPCs. I have a cabinet photo of the all-service team from Pottsville in 1919. I mean, this is the team that played together during World War I. and many of them ended up being firemen at the Yorkville Fire Company, where the Maroons kind of emerged out of. So I kind of consider that team to be the first Maroons team. And I love that photo. I've never seen another one. And that, to me, is really special because it's kind of their first team, right, before they got famous and all that good stuff. The last one would probably be, and I've mentioned this before, is when the Maroons asked permission to play the exhibit game against the Notre Dame All-Stars in 1925, that ultimately cost them the NFL championship, because on the field they won the championship. They lost because they played a game that wasn't supposedly sanctioned by the NFL, and the NFL took away their franchise. The owner of the Maroons, Doc Striegel, swore up and down that he had called the NFL. He had talked not to Joe Carr, who was the president, because he was in the hospital, unfortunately for the Maroons, but to Bunny Corcoran, who was a good friend of Carr's and often sat in the office and answered calls and tried to run business when Carr wasn't available. And Striegel said, I called him, and he told us it was okay to play this game. And there were two other people in the room. There was Dick Rauch, who was the coach, and there was Dick Stallman, who was a player. Dick Rauch's affidavit that Joe Zacco got before Dick Rauch died to prove that this call happened, because Bunny Corcoran later claimed, I kind of talked to him, but I didn't promise him anything, and Joe Carr, never acknowledged that it was legit. Dick Rauch testified and notarized that he was there and he heard the conversation, and at the end of it, Joe Striegel said, I just got permission from the NFL, and Dick Stallman notarized and authorized. Well, in one of those two big bins that I got, and I cannot believe they passed this over, was Dick Stallman's notarized letter to the NFL that he was there for that call, and he heard that call happen. And, that to me is football history right there. It is the crux of the entire issue with the 25 Maroons and the NFL, right? So I have that, which is really cool. I love that piece.
That's NFL history for sure.
Wow.
Dang.
Unbelievable.
Those are probably my biggies.
Jeff, do you have anything on your want list that you're looking for that is actually can't be spoken about? Because I know sometimes you don't want to get into a bidding war with somebody who knows that you're looking for something, or at the end of the show I get a call and say, hey, you know that guy that was on your show? Well, I got it for him. Got to meet me.
Yeah,
meet me
I like
line
those.
91.
And that's my philosophy is I've always been a big believer that, hoarding knowledge is not a good strategy, right? It doesn't work for most foreign governments, right? Especially dictators. And in this day and age, information just flows everywhere. And so I'm not a big believer that you should keep secret what you're after or whatever. What I found is that the more you broadcast what you're looking for, the more people approach you when they see something that you're looking for. And it just adds to your network, right? It adds to your tentacles. If somebody, and the other thing is it's a hobby, right? I don't care if I get that outbid, right? I'll be bummed for a day or whatever. And you know what I found is a lot of times the next time that exact same thing rolls around, you actually get it cheaper than what you would have paid for it originally. It's just karma, right?
Yeah.
It's just happened to me on eBay. There was something I missed twice on, and I really wanted it, and I was kicking myself. It came back up on eBay. Got it for probably about $150, lower than when I bid on it the last time and lost. Exact same item. And I'm like, I don't know how that happened, but I'll take it, right? So I actually, I don't hide information because I don't think there's any, benefit to me to do that, because I quite honestly don't care enough if I don't win. And I feel like my tentacles are a lot bigger if everybody knows what I'm looking for. So, I mean, I'm working on the star player candy set, right?
Yep.
Go ahead,
it's
Joe.
exactly why I announced to people that I'm after a 35 chickle uncut sheet. Who knows?
I know. I've probably heard that from you, Joe, like 25 times now. I mean, I know exactly who to call if I ever see one. You'll beat it into my brain, and if I ever see one, you will be my first call. I guarantee you. I will not try to hoard that sucker. It will be headed to your collection, man. So I know how much you want it.
Brother.
I know how much you want it. Yeah. But anyway, I'm trying to finish the Star Player candy set. We mentioned we were joking about that trade we did a while ago. I have about half of that set, and I only know one person has the complete set of football. It's really hard. I don't know that I'll ever complete that one either. But that's one that I would really like to complete someday. So anybody out there that has Star Player candy football, I'm your man. I'm looking for them, man. I'd love to get that set completed.
Wow, nice. Jeff, I've always been impressed with people like you who just immerse themselves in a topic like the Pottsville Maroons. These deep dives into history, and you just kind of own it. I mean, and you mentioned it earlier. To say, to collect the postcards or anything Pottsville is definitely a decade-long undertaking. So, do you have any suggestions for somebody who's listening or is like, you know what, that's fascinating, reads the Breaker Boys and is like, I want to start digging into Pottsville memorabilia? You have any suggestions? Somebody wants to get into that?
Yeah, actually I do. I was thinking about this question because you guys always ask this question. And, so, I mean, as you all know, there's all sorts of shysters out there. There's fakes and forgeries and trimmed and reconditioned and, stuff where you hear a story but there's no provenance to it. People trying to get you to overpay. I mean, there's so much nastiness out there. And I feel like nothing hurts our hobby worse than a newer collector buying something, realizing they got duped, right? And then just having a bad taste and just getting out of the hobby. And so I always tell new collectors, look, whatever you're after, and it doesn't matter if it's $1 or it's $1,000, you need to educate yourself. You need to understand. There's people out there that know a lot about this set or about this item or whatever. You need to find them, you need to pick their brain, and you need to understand it so you can make good decisions. Because I feel like a lot of times people just kind of, they see something, they want it, they read something, they think, that sounds pretty legit, and they buy it, and then they get burned. And the only way you can, avoid that is to educate yourself. So I would tell new collectors, you got to educate yourself, right? You got to know what about the stuff you're going after, or you're going to get burned. There's too many people out there that want to take advantage of you.
And that's an excellent point for the simple reason I end up getting an email or a phone call after they bought it and say, what do you mean it's not worth anything? I was told it was worth X amount of dollars, yada, yada, yada. And then, it gets frustrating for me because, I've done it, 1,000 times over if I did it once. And I tell the people, why did you buy it for? Did you research it? Did you look at it? Did you talk to anybody?
Yeah.
So you're spot on when you say educate yourself with regards to what you're going to purchase or what you're going to collect. Hey, we're almost out of time. Jeff, any final parting words, thoughts?
No, this has been awesome, guys. Really enjoyed it. Always love to talk Maroons, so appreciate you having me on. It was fun. A lot of fun.
Well, thank you for being on, Jeff, and taking time out of your schedule to be on. We appreciate it, and what an education tonight on the Pottsville Maroons and their memorabilia, and especially the postcard set. Incredible. Jeff, hey, thanks for being on. All right, Joe, wrap.
Thanks.
Running out of time. 2-minute warning. Wrap up. Handing off to you. What'd you pick up on tonight's show?
Jeff's such a good friend of the hobby, and I love when people say this, but when they're forthcoming with their knowledge, not only are they forthcoming with it, they don't hide it, but they're actually willing to put together really deep dives into certain topics that enlighten all of us to a brief period in time. I mean, he's mentioned that affidavit before, And I was just here shaking my head. It's so cool. Just, good friends of the hobby. It reminds me of you, Bob. I mean, think about how committed you are to the hobby doing this podcast and Gridiron Greats. And I mean, yeah, it's a small, intimate gathering, all of us. And I dig it.
Well, I agree with that. I had the honor of going over Jeff's house there a year or two ago, and I just saw football history everywhere I looked. It was a very, very invigorating weekend for me, seeing that stuff, spending time with the icons that I did. I missed out this year, unfortunately, with everything that went on. We had a gathering scheduled. Obviously, it fell through, but hopefully down the road we'll all get together again. And Joe, it will be up to you to get out there and be part of it also at the same time. We're down to a minute. Again, if you're not a subscriber to Gridiron Greats Magazine, what are you waiting for? Check out our website, gridirongreatsmagazine.com. Final thoughts, Joe. 30 seconds or less.
I dig that. If you're not a subscriber, what are you waiting for? What are you doing? Get in there. I like it. Absolutely.
All right. That's about all I got for tonight. And thanks for being on. Joe, good to hear from you again. Jeff, thanks for being on. And we'll be back within probably the next 2 weeks with another show. Until then, take care. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I wanted to thank you for stopping by to listen to another episode here on the Sports History Network. Our podcasters are passionate about uncovering and sharing sports stories from yesteryear. And if you didn't know it already, we have over 30 shows across the network covering all sorts of sports history topics. In fact, here's a glimpse into one of our awesome podcasts here on the network.
Each week, the official Football Learning Academy podcast will take you deep into the history of pro football through interviews with players, coaches, or administrators in the NFL, as well as interviews with Pro Football Hall of Fame selectors, authors, and historians. You'll learn how the game evolved and important moments that shaped the sport into what it is today. And don't miss the Pro Football History Nugget of the Week. Listen to the official Football Learning Academy podcast on the Sports History Network.
How about that? I bet you're super hyped to go listen to that new podcast, right? Well, to learn about this show and all the other podcasts on the network, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Again, that's sportshistorynetwork.com/podcast. Head over there today to find your next favorite sports history podcast.